Hello everyone, welcome back to Unraveling Politics, a show where I discuss the political news of the day and provide my analysis in a way you can understand. I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving like I did. Got to see family and meet up with some friends, so it's great. So we are now kind of in the period what is known, well, we were in it before, but is known as the lame duck session. So it is the period before the inauguration, but after the election. So the politicians from the previous election are still in office, they're still doing their jobs, but they will be leaving office soon. So that's the kind of period that we're in right now. We're probably going to talk more about what's going on currently next week, but instead we're going to focus a bit on the future and specifically Trump's tariffs. Now, this received a lot of attention toward the end of the campaign, but not so much in the middle and the beginning. And truthfully, it didn't receive as much attention as I thought it deserved, because these tariffs would be deeply damaging to our economy in many ways, and I'll explain that in a moment. First, let me say that I am not an economist. That is not my area of expertise. I am just going to know what I've researched, what I've learned in my one economics class I've taken in college so far. So we're going to go from there, and this is all pretty basic stuff. I know it's basic because it's what I understand. So let's see, what is Trump promising? In the past week, Trump has promised a 25% tariff on all goods coming in from Mexico and Canada. So what is a tariff? Now, I'm sure many of you know what a tariff is, but a tariff is basically a tax on imports. So a 25% tariff would be placed on the producers or sellers, depending on what point that it would be placed at, and that would of course be passed on to us. So if a 25% tariff is placed on, it is very safe to assume that most, if not the entire tariff, is going to be passed on to us, the U.S. consumers. So these tariffs, 25% would mean that everything that comes into the country would be 25% more expensive than it otherwise would have been. And what is the reason that Trump is doing this? Well, Trump, in terms of Mexico and Canada, wants to stop illegal migration. That's one of his big campaign pledges. It's very, 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 very palatable to the base. They love that. There have been illegal migrants coming in from Canada and Mexico, really, since before they were even countries. But more recently, from Mexico, there's been 56,530 border apprehensions, which is much lower than it was last year. Let me just say that was in October, because we don't have November's data yet. But from Canada, there was 23,721 from October 2023 to September 2024. So there's way less migrants coming in from Canada than there is from Mexico. So Trump is lumping the two together, which is not entirely true. It's true, but it's not entirely a fair comparison. But yes, there are illegal migrants coming in from Canada and border apprehensions. It does happen. So Trump has been talking to the Mexican president, Claudia Sheinbaum. She was just elected earlier this year, and Justin Trudeau, who's the Prime Minister of Canada. The Canadians, or at least from the Canadian side, is the Canadians are worried about migrants entering into Canada from the United States, fleeing Trump's deportations, which we'll talk about later. And the Mexican government has said that her government would not close borders but instead build bridges, which is, in case you're politically illiterate, build bridges basically means she's not going to be closing the border. By building bridges, she means she's okay with what's going on right now. And that's not a surprise, because she was the protege of the previous president, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. And he was president since 2018 to 2024. And he let those migrants come in under the Trump and Biden administrations, more so under the Biden administration. And this comes at the same time where Trump has said that Sheinbaum would agree to stop migration through Mexico. And she's like, that's not what I said. And then she said what I just told you a moment ago. So on Saturday, which is the day I'm recording this, Trudeau met with Trump in Florida to discuss to discuss the tariffs. So it seems that the Canadians are willing to cooperate with us, because it would be deeply damaging to both their economy and our economy if these tariffs went into place. And shockingly, Justin Trudeau is the first foreign dictator, first foreign leader to visit the president-elect. And by the way, I'll throw out there, the next G7 meeting will be in Canada, which is in Alberta in June of 2025. So that will probably be, assuming the tariffs are not in place by then, that will be a big discussion between a lot of our leaders like Britain, France, Germany, and Canada. And let me throw in there, what tariffs, usually once they're put in place, they are never removed. So $438 billion is the amount that Canada sends to the United States. And there's a lot of stuff that is not there's a lot of stuff that once it's tariffs, it's not ever untariffed. So for example, Biden kept the $350 billion of Trump tariffs. And usually those tariffs are never removed. They're decades-long tariffs. There's a reason why German cars are way nicer than other cars, because we had tariffs on them, and those tariffs still exist. And that's why, in some cases, they're way more expensive. And this includes a 25% tariff on oil. Now, this would be very, 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 very bad. And the reason I explain that is because that would cause U.S. gas prices to go up between 35 and 60 cents a gallon, depending on how much the price of oil is. If oil is the way it is now, it'll be closer to 35 cents. But if it rises to $100 a barrel, it's going to be closer to 60 cents. Now, not all of the United States gets Canadian oil, but regions like the Midwest and the Plain States, including parts of the Upper South, they get Canadian oil. Texas and the Gulf Coast and the West Coast and they are mostly immune, but parts of the Northeast also receive Canadian oil. So that means that if we're in that area, expect gas prices to rise if these tariffs go into effect, because depending on where the level of tariffs is going to be placed, it could be placed on refineries, and in that case, it's going to be passed on to gas stations and then on to us. It could be placed on the oil companies, which is going to be passed on to refineries, then gas station owners, and then us. If you want more information on that, I highly recommend you check out the Over a Barrel podcast. I was just listening to them earlier, got some of this information. They have some good stuff on that. So if you are interested in oil dynamics and oil markets like I am, highly recommend you check that out. So the Trudeau government, let me throw this out there. They are, maybe I'll do an episode on this eventually, but they are 20 points behind in the polls. So they do not want to see the Canadian economy, because next year is an election year. Do they not want to see the Canadian economy be crippled? Because what I would expect them to do is for them to place tariffs back on us, even if there was no election, because that's what makes the most sense. If you are getting what is essentially attacked, you do not want, you just don't want to let that slide. So the Canadian Conservatives, they are at 43%. The Liberals, who are the governing party, are at 23%. The left-wing New Democrats are at 18%. The Bloc Separatists in Quebec are at 8%, and the Greens are at 4%. So the Conservatives are 20 points ahead in the national polls, which at this point means Justin Trudeau is going to be gone. He's I'll just tell you this right now, there's not a single chance. There's not a snowball's chance in hell that Justin Trudeau is going to be prime minister after next year. So if he wants to focus on his legacy, he wants to make sure that this doesn't happen. Anyway, moving on. Let's move on to some taxes. There's going to be a big battle over taxes over the next year, because the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is finally going to expire. Well, the tax cuts for the middle class is going to expire. The tax cuts for upper class people, those are going to stay. So if you're not aware what the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is, it was passed in December 2017. It took effect, I believe, in 2019, maybe 2018. And they've been what we've been living under the last few years. And they lowered the tax rates. The top rate of income tax was lowered from 39.6 to 37. 35 was kept the same. 33 was lowered to 32. 28 was lowered to 24. 25 was lowered to 22. 15 was lowered to 12. And 10 was kept at 10. So in terms of income taxes for the middle class, which would be the now 24, 22, and 12 tax brackets were in fact lowered, and the standard deduction was raised. The personal exemption was suspended until 2025. The individual mandate was repealed. However, it did raise the exemption tax, which is to $13.6 million. So that's more targeted to rich people. To extend the tax cuts as they are right now for another few years would be 10 trillion. It would be 4 trillion over 10 years. So they are floating about extending it for just 4 years. If they did that, it would be less costly, yes, but ultimately wouldn't solve the problem. We would be back here in the same issue in just 4 years. And it's going to cost trillions and trillions of dollars to do this. And our deficits are already at $2 trillion a year. And nobody likes paying taxes, me included, but our taxes need to be a lot higher not lower, in order to pay down the deficit. So we'll have to wait and see. That is on Republicans' day 100-day agenda. On November 12th, they had a New Day in America, I don't know what you would call it, press conference, and Mike Johnson was at the Capitol, and their plan is to end COVID subsidies, lower taxes, lower or limit food stamps and WIC, cut the size of government, roll back Biden's green energy bill, green energy solutions, among other things. So rolling back Biden's green energy subsidies would net $900 billion. So that would be $1 trillion, but they also want to spend up to $8 trillion on more taxes. So I've heard different stuff. It would be $8 trillion, $4 trillion. And then you're going to have to and then they say that the tariffs are going to raise more money, but those are going to hurt mostly poor and lower income and middle class people. We'll have to wait and see. If you ask me, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is going to be extended. There's no way that Congress is going to let these taxes go back up, because it would be deeply unpopular. People are going to go into 2026 and they're going to see their taxes go way, way up. But at the same time, I don't think these tariffs are going to go through either, because if they do, prices are going to go way higher, and people are not going to like that. The administration will be over before it even begins. So I don't actually expect Trump to get to do some of this stuff. If he does implement the tariffs, which I don't think he will. I think he's trying to use it as a threat. If he does, then he's going to be so unpopular in the 2026 midterms. Democrats are going to sweep to power in the House. Will they win the Senate? Probably not, for reasons we've explained before. But they're going to be deeply, Democrats are going to be in power, and Republicans are going to be deeply unpopular. And then they're going to have to face an election in 4 years without an incumbent, which we can talk about later. But that's kind of the hole they dug themselves into, is they have these grand promises like to cut energy prices in half, to lower crime, to lower inflation, to cut border crossings. It's going to be difficult to do all these things. Yet the House Majority Leader, Steve Scalise, says they're going to be ready on day one. So we'll have to see. And then I'll throw this out here. Another thing that's going to cost a lot of money is going to be the deportations. These deportations, which they say there's 11 million illegal immigrants in this country. There's no way it's that. There was 11 million like 10 years ago, and we've had way more people enter our country. It's got to be at least 20 or 30 million, at least. These deportations, and Trump he said at his Madison Square Garden rally, on day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history to get the criminals out. And he seems to be following through on this threat, because he's put immigration hardliners like Kristi Noem and Tom Hammond in the cabinet, which I've talked about in the previous episode. While technically every illegal immigrant is a criminal because they're here illegally, many of them are not. However, I have seen evidence going both ways that yes, legal immigrants commit lower crimes at lower rates than U.S. citizens, but illegal immigrants do more crime than U.S. citizens. And the reason for that is because they're less likely to be detected. So I've seen it go both ways. Definitely know that legal immigrants have lower crime, but I've seen both ways on illegal immigrants. And then, by the way, that's, as I said, is if you exclude the fact that all illegal immigrants are criminals. This will no doubt hurt the American agricultural industry in states like California, Georgia, and Florida. and might stoke inflation. And let me just say this right now. Trump's agenda is very inflationary. Reducing the labor supply, raising tariffs, raising deficits, lowering taxes. What does that all do? That cuts back on supply and that increases demand. And when you do those things, in a time that we've already had some inflation is about to get back to normal, but we are in an inflationary environment, what does that do? That creates more inflation. The only thing that he wants to do that would not be inflationary is to cut energy prices in half, but there's no way he's going to do that. That's impossible. I'm not even going to get into that, but that's not happening. There's no way you can cut energy prices in half. If you were working a job and your wages were suddenly cut in half, would you be working more or less? You'd be working less, and that's exactly what oil companies are going to do. They're not just going to, we don't have a nationalized oil industry in this country, thankfully, because if we did, that would be very bad. If we had a nationalized oil industry in this country, we could potentially do that. But oil companies are not going to cut oil prices from $70 to $35. They're not going to do it, because that would make them lose money. So, anyway, as I was saying, this is very inflationary. So what is the Federal Reserve going to do? The Federal Reserve is going to raise interest rates. And what is that going to do? That's going to make mortgage payments go up. It should eventually lower house prices, but it will make mortgage payments go up. It will make student loan payments go up. It will make credit card debt interest rates go up. It will make everything go up. So what does that also do? When you have higher interest rates, especially because these interest rates would be higher here than they would be in other countries because we have tariffs now, there would be, what's that's going to do is that's going to raise the value of the U.S. dollar. And the reason that you do that the reason that happens is because investors are more attracted to the dollar. If they can earn more interest, they're going to save their money in dollars and they're going to buy government bonds. So now we have a higher dollar. If you're not aware of what that means, a higher dollar in a way is good for us American consumers because that means we can buy more, but it's bad for American producers. Why is it bad for American producers? It means it's more expensive for other people in the rest of the world to buy American products. So what do I mean? Say the euro is $1. Say you need $1.20 to buy 1 euro. If you say that's cut immediately down to 1-to-1. So that means for European customers, the price of American goods just jumped 20%. It's 20% more expensive to buy. So that means that American industries are going to suffer. It'll be good for us consumers because we'll be able to buy more, but that's going to mean American producers are going to suffer. And that's exactly the opposite of what Trump wants to do. Then Trump has a way to, this is what he's been saying, he wants to devalue the U.S. dollar. That's not going to happen. His economic policies do the opposite. The only way to devalue the U.S. dollar, because we don't have the president can't just pull a lever and devalue the dollar, is if we make an agreement with other countries to get them to produce less and us to produce more, the way that China does. There's no way other countries are going to agree to that. Why would they agree to hamstring their own industries to do that? Unless we're going to threaten them with tariffs. And if we do that, that'll only make the dollar stronger. So, and let me throw this in here. We do this in the 1980s where we got Germany to produce less and us to produce more. But is Trump really going to get that done? Especially in 4 years. He only has 4 years to do all this. This can't be done in 20 years, much less 4 years. So this is going to be a big problem here, and I hope I've explained why. Anyway, well, we'll have to wait and see what happens. There's a lot of over-promising, and now they got to over-deliver. Alrighty, well, I want to thank you for tuning in. This was a little bit of a rant, but hopefully you see why this is going to be a very interesting 4 years ahead. So I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Thank you for listening. I also want to throw in there, we are on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and we're also on YouTube. So if you're listening on YouTube and you like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, go out to there and vice versa. Doesn't matter to me. So thank you for tuning in and have a great week and see you next week. Bye-bye.